So that was the gathering, a little video clip there. We'll show that through the day. And obviously, Carl will share more about that. The details are on your tables. Okay, so all about the gathering, which is over 3 days in June time. And the details on there, the finances. Just to say, those that are local in the area to us, if you struggle with those finances in any way, please do come and speak to me. And we will help you with those. We want you to go with us. But we do understand that obviously in situations at the moment, maybe you're out of work, maybe there are financial difficulties, but we are here to help you and take you with us on that journey. There were several of us that went from the church here, one or two other churches as well involved with that last year, and we had a wonderful time. And so we're planning again to not only take 6 of us, but we want to take 12 or maybe more of us this time. So double or triple the numbers. And, you know, it will be a great time. The judge will be there, I'm sure, once again. On that journey of life. But again, that's what the flyers are. So invite your friends, relatives, neighbours, invite a work colleague. We've just come past Christmas, so you should have bought your friend a ticket for Christmas. But I'm sure it's birthdays coming up, and Christmas is soon round the corner, isn't it? So you can treat somebody for an early Christmas present, can't you? Yeah, so the details on there as well. So without further ado, let's put a wonderful warm hands together and welcome Carl as he comes to share.
Thank you, mate. And let's continue the applause for Denver and the breakfast blokes. Yes. We travel the country for a breakfast, our speakers. It's a great privilege as well to have Tough Talk with us. I first came across Tough Talk when I was, I hadn't recently started Bible college, actually. And I went to the Christian Resources exhibition. Anyone ever been to that? Yeah, did you go back? This is a shocker. I've never seen anything like it. It was like a den of thieves and vipers. There's all these people flogging Christian stuff like bells, Christian onesies, prayer socks. It was unbelievable. And they were giving out awards. I'm not joking either. Brings out the worst in me. When I was manning a stand for Christian Vision for Men, they always put me opposite the Christian onesie stand. They just brought out everything bad in me. Wanted to fight him. Anyway, I first heard Tough Talk there. And they were winning an award for this groundbreaking evangelistic thing. And I remember, seriously, and I remember these like strong men, fearless for Christ. And I was like, oh, one day when I'm grown up, I'd like to be like them. And now here we are working together. Yeah, is that the only time? Only time. Yeah, and it is amazing if you continue on the journey and you continue on the journey that the people that you inspire you can become your mates, and then you can collide together and do stuff together. It's been a great privilege for me to work with these guys on and off over the years. You're going to have a great time when you listen to them. And on a series about Denver, putting this together, he's relentlessly cheering on the blokes and relentless doing stuff in this area along with Stephen and others. And salute you for that, mate. It's hard graft, as you rightly said, getting the blokes out. It's hard. It's hard. And he weren't joking. If I put on a women's, not me put on a women's event, if I get a woman's put on a women's event, all I need to do is, you've got a bit of Nescafe and a cross on. 1,000 women will turn up. With the blokes, I've got the red arrows, we're going to blow someone up, burn something, shoot a couple of blokes. do all this stuff, and you get 4 men and a ferret. It's like really hard work. Anyway, which leads me to this, just to flesh this out. The Gathering. I've been saying for years, it's like Top Gear meets Songs of Praise. And the basic story behind this, because it is relevant, I was bored of my own events. I was bored of myself. I would turn up to events that I had organised and speak and bore myself. I'd drive home falling asleep at myself. And I remember thinking once, I've got to do something different. And my predecessor, many years ago, at what was once called Christian Viewpoint for Men, do you know why I changed the name? It was at a Christian Resources exhibition. This bloke came up to me and went, "What's your viewpoint?" I went, "On what?" He went, "The impending avian bird flu crisis." I'm not joking. I went, "I don't know." And he went, "Well, he says you've got a Christian Viewpoint for Men. What's your viewpoint on that then, fella?" I thought, I think we need to change the name. So we did. And I did it the cheapest way possible without having to change the logos. So I just changed the word. Anyway, my predecessor, true story, had organised a cruise from Liverpool to Dublin. That's how he flogged it, a cruise from Liverpool to Dublin. It was a ferry from Liverpool to Dublin. And no one bought a ticket. And my predecessor had spent like 80 grand on the deposits, and no one booked in. And my wife said, "Why don't you just offer a free place to people who don't know Christ?" And we did, and we filled it up. And we sailed over, and I thought the ministry was going to go bankrupt. The captain of the ferry came over to me on the way back, and he went, "You've eaten more food in 24 hours than we do in a week's cruise on this ferry to the Channel Islands." Like, wow. Anyway, because on a cruise, apparently, you can just keep asking for more, can't you? Another 3 lobsters, please. It wasn't like that, though. It was a ferry. Another couple of sausages. Anyway, on the way back, I thought we were going to go bankrupt, and I thought, do you know what? I've got to sort this out. Then a man called Eric Dell preached the gospel. A load of men gave their lives to Christ. Then he made an appeal to pay the deficit. The deficit got covered. But I was sitting around the table a bit fed up with my team. And I said, I can't keep doing this. We can't keep just doing normal conferences. We cannot just keep getting men sitting in rows. We've got to do something where I'd be comfortable inviting my mates. I'm a Romford boy, born in Dagenham. I've got to do something where I can get my mates along. And they said, "What do you want to do?" And I went, "Blow stuff up, comedians, bands, RAF display teams, military stuff. You know, play chess if you want. Football, ain't football, but football, anything like that." And they said, "What do you need to do that?" Serious moment. I went, "We need a field." At that moment, this bloke walked over to me with a cardboard tube, posh bloke. How did I know he was posh? He had welfare, which is like when it's all slicked back and luscious. He had welfare, and he had a jumper tied around his neck. That's how I knew he was rich. And he came over to me. He did. One of them cashmere ones, all tied up. And he came over in a pair of chinos, shiny shoes. I thought, he's got money. Now, when you're born in Dagenham or Dargenham and a wealth bloke comes over, I used to be intimidated. And I used to mimic them. I can't help it. I sort of mimic their accent. Not being rude, I just get intimidated. So he came over and he said, "Hello, are you Carl Beach?" And I went, "Yes, I am." Seriously. And everyone around the table was looking at me going, "What's happening? What's he doing?" And he went, "Can I show you what's in my tube?" And I went, "Yes, please, yes." And all the team were going, "What's going on?" And then he pulled out a map of polo fields. And he went, "I have just bought some polo fields." I went, "Oh, good." And I went, "Why?" And he said, "Well, I'm a polo club, my farm." I went, "Oh." And he said, "And then my son drove through the gates, which still exist to this day, and the Lord gave him a vision from heaven of thousands of men worshipping God." He said, "And I've come over to ask, have you ever thought of doing a different type of conference for which you need a field?" Straight after that conversation. And that is the field near Swindon where we hold this event. Now, this won't mean something to every one of you here, because not all of you here know Christ. But since that day, 1,300 men have made first-time commitments to Christ. And we've had them. That's amazing, isn't it? And we've had a right old laugh. In fact, I have nothing to do with the production of this leaflet. And it says 3 days of fun, which I don't like that word, fun. It's 3 days of an amazing bit of banter and a good crack. And you can invite your mates along who don't know Jesus, and they won't be embarrassed. We're unashamed about talking about Christ. We'd have an amazing laugh along the way. We do lots of crazy stuff that you could only get away with in a field near Swindon. And like every Saturday, I've come up with this idea of having fancy dress. And we don't tell people why. There's never been a reason. And one year we set a theme of space. And we had like nearly 2,000 men all dressed up as astronauts and Darth Vader and stormtroopers. And then I preached the message of Christ. And I always have this old driftwood cross I take with me everywhere. I have it propped up the front. And I tell men to come forward and kneel before the cross and surrender their lives to Christ. And I kid you not, I did this impassioned plea. I was dressed as Captain Kirk. I did this impassioned plea. And then down, it's like 2,000 men, and down the aisle, I could see this orange blob. He was bouncing like this, coming forward. And he had orange makeup on his face, and he was weeping. He'd come dressed as a space hopper, and he'd given his life to Jesus. And he was trying to get to the front, and he couldn't get off the thing. And he's going, I've got to get forward. And I'm like, what have I done? This is terrible. And then, this is no word of a lie. This bloke called this bloke was in a prayer ministry team, dressed as Darth Vader, came over and led him to Jesus. I am your father. I mean, it was unbelievable. So get yourself booked in. It's quite a thing. I've been asked to do 2 talks today based on my life story. Apologies if any of you have heard this before. I'll change it a little bit. I'll make something up. That's a parable then, isn't it? If you make something up and you can't remember if it's true, it's a parable. Now, I'll tell you the story of how I gave my life to Jesus. And then the second part, I'm going to talk about some extremely brutal challenges that I've had to face and I'm still navigating. Because I think the danger is with people like me, we come up all effervescent, bouncing around like Tigger, full of joy, which I genuinely am. Everything you're seeing is the real me. I don't have a filter. But you think, oh, they've got it buttoned down. But let me tell you, that is not the reality. We've all got a story. We all face challenges. I'm 52 in February. I don't think you get to half a century without a few snags. And particularly if you're pioneering and leading and you've got your head above a parapet, you might have a few more snags. And I've had my fair share. I wasn't always a Christian. Let me put this out there right now. If you're sitting here today and the idea of coming into a room, having a bit of bacon and then singing is a bit weird, I get it. Because it was to me. And even sometimes now I have to think, I straddle different worlds. Now I work in the secular world, I work in the Christian world. It can feel a bit strange if you've never encountered this before. So I'm talking to you guys principally, but also all of you here who follow Jesus. I hope that my story is in some way an encouragement. But I hope you leave here today, if you don't know Christ, either knowing him or being a step closer to knowing him. My dad was a cop. He was an old school Met Police detective. He started off on the beat. I think he did 5 years on the beat in the East End of London. And then back in the day, in the 60s, they used to do something called creaming you off into CID. It was like you had to pass a sergeant's exam then and be pretty much at the top of your game. Then they used to put you in a crime squad, undercover, finding crime. You had to do at least 4 or 5 arrests a week. And then if you got through that for a couple of years, you sat aboard and you became a detective. My dad was a street detective in the Met in the times when they were dealing with a lot of the organised crime gangs. Everyone's got a crazy story, but I could say some very real stuff that my dad was involved in. He was a very hard detective. He then went on to do something called the Flying Squad. And then he did the forerunner to he was the inspector on the Flying Squad, and then the Regional Crime Squad, which was the forerunner to the Serious Organised Crime Agency today. Except in those days, they're running around like John Wayne, you know. My mum was a dressmaker who then gave up work to raise me and my sister. My sister's 3.5 years older than me. My dad worked hard. He'd often disappear because of the nature of his work. He retired as the senior murder investigator for the Met Police. He's in his mid-80s now. Like all men, you kind of soften and mellow with age. But I had quite an austere upbringing. And I was raised to be a man who was true to his word, believe it or not. You'd say, well, he's a cop, mate, he probably bent, he weren't. He was always, he fought fire with fire, but he was a straight-talking man. And I was not raised to believe that there was a God in heaven. As you can imagine, he saw the worst of humanity, and he raised me with that in mind. I remember being no older than 6 or 7, and my dad coming home, back in the day when this probably was more routine. he came home with a Hessian sack for the guns that they'd confiscated off an armed robbery gang. He was turning over at that time probably 2 armed robberies a week, he said. They were in full-on combat with pickaxe handles and revolvers, and they turned over an armed robbery squad. He thought, I think I'll take the guns home for my son to play with. And I remember him tipping them out on the kitchen floor, this sack of guns, holding half a sawn-off shotgun. No joke. Vivid memory. And I think it was half a sawn-off shotgun, so before he hit someone over the head with it and it snapped or something. But it was half a sawn-off shotgun, and my mum coming into the kitchen going, Brian, get that filth out of the house. And my dad going, only guns, sweetheart, it won't hurt him. That was the kind of vibe that I was raised with. But, let me say this. I believe that God has been speaking to you, whether you know him or not, since the day you were born and before. That's what the Bible tells in Psalm 139, that he knows every day ordained for you. He's been whispering to your heart since before the day you were born. When I was 5 years old, my dad had to get promoted back in those days. No one wanted to do internal investigations. My dad was assigned to Scotland Yard to do internal investigations onto seriously corrupt police officers, murders and rapes and that kind of stuff. And for that reason, we used to get on Hornchurch Underground on the tube and travel up to St James Park, where Scotland Yard was. When I was 5 years old, for those few years, I used to sit on the London Underground train and go past sort of Dagenham and around Bethnal Green, all around there, Stepney Green, and it was still bombed out from the war in the mid-70s. And it was very poor. It's been developed now, but it was very poor. And there were people living in essentially slum communities. Now, I cannot tell you why this is, other than the fact I think God was whispering to my heart. I used to sit on that train, look out the tube window, and hate what I saw. Even I was raised to not love people, do what you've got to do to get through life, more on that in a minute. I used to look out that window and I'd cry. And I remember my mum saying once to me, why is this upsetting you? And I went, I don't like it, and one day I'm going to change it. That was the first time I ever I felt God whispering in my heart. And that persisted with me all the way through my life. If you're sitting here today and you don't know Jesus, you're even in doubt that Christ could exist or if there's a God in heaven, I absolutely guarantee you there is a sub-routine going in your life where God has been speaking to you. And I'm hoping that somehow we'll join the dots of that today. I've no doubt about it at all. At age 12, the Gideons bloke came round the school. We were in Hornchurch, Emerson Park Comprehensive, in Hornchurch, fairly rough school. Can you imagine what it's like when your dad's a cop, growing up on the edge of the East End? You had to be a little bit tough yourself to get through. We were sitting on the floor. The Gideons guy came in. He was wearing a power suit. And I'll never forget this to the day I die. He had a big load, shocking load of white hair, tall bloke, big suit. He's holding this little red Bible. And he said, this book will change your life. But I will not give you a copy unless you shake my hand and look me in the eye and promise that you'll read it every day. Don't think they'd do that now. That's what happened back then. And so we all had to line up. We shook his hand. We went, do you promise to read this book every day, son? Yes, sir, I promise to read it every day. Give you this little red Bible. My dad, as I said, had told me that my word is my bond. If I say I'm going to do something, I shake hands on it, you do it. I've been like that ever since. The things that your parents put into you, they're powerful, aren't they? They put that into my heart. So I took that little Bible and I read it every single day. In the front of that Bible, it says, where to read if you're sad, lonely, depressed, suicidal. There's nowhere to read if you're really happy, actually, in that little guide book in the front. But anyway, which is the thing I passed on. Anyway, I read it for a couple of weeks. And then my mate Biggsy, I'm still mates with today, came over to me and he goes, Beachy, have you seen what the Bible's made of? And I went, no, mate. And he went, Rizzlers. It's made of Rizzlers. So I smoked it. We smoked the first Bible I was ever given from Revelation, which is the last book in the Bible, back to Hebrews. I actually told someone that once and someone walked out of the meeting. I was only a kid. I'm telling them my story. Got right offended. Anyway, I smoked it from Revelation back to Hebrews because I didn't want my mum and dad noticing the pages are missing. This becomes relevant in a bit. Then nothing happened from there, but a seed was sown. There were things I read in that book then that stuck in me. And it niggled me. It just like niggled me. And I can't explain why. There was something in it that gripped me. And every now and again, that little red book with the pages missing, I'd look at it. And occasionally I'd flick on it. It's like I knew that there was truth there. The Bible is the most owned book in the world. It is the out-and-out bestseller that will never appear in any bestsellers list. I wonder why. It will never appear in the Sunday Times bestsellers list. But it's the out-and-out best-selling book in all the world of all time. And most people know it contains some treasure in it, but it's left on the shelf. At age 18, I'm sitting in an A-level English lesson because I wanted to join the British Army. I'd applied to join at 16, but the recruiting person has sent me away saying he got half a brain. You could become an officer. So I went through army officer selection. I applied to join the 17th 21st Lancers, a cavalry regiment. I didn't know nothing about it. I just thought the motto was really good. It was death or glory. I thought, that's a good one. Join that, death or glory. It's stupid when you're a kid. I'll die, glorious. Wouldn't do that now. Now I'd do pipe and slippers. Yeah, let's do that one. Yeah. Where's the baked scone cream tea regiment? I'll do that now. Death or glory, boys. Anyway, Major Norman at Horse Guards, I opened my mouth for like a sentence. And he looked like, oh yeah, I'd like to join the 17th, 21st Lancers, sir. And he's like, boys in your background don't join the cavalry, old son. They join the tanks. So I was unbelievable. Boys on your side of the Thames, he said. So, that's actually what he said. So I was going to join the Royal Tank Regiment. So I had to do A-levels. I'm in this A-level lesson, sitting next to my partner in crime, Bigsy. And this guest speaker, he's an actor from the Barbican Centre in London, a Shakespearean actor. And he suddenly stopped. It just happened to me twice in my life. He stopped what he was saying, and he said, there are a group of people around the world who are so convicted by what they believe, they die for it. And there's like this pause. Now, looking back, he must have been a cheeky Christian, trying to get away with doing a bit of evangelism in a school. Anyone knowing? Gutsy. And then he said, we call them born-again Christians. And I went, as a born-again Christian, it's Cliff Richard. And he'd just done mistletoe and wine, which is not good. I know some of you might like it. I've got a feeling Stephen's looking at me, he likes a bit of mistletoe and wine. And he said, are there any born-again Christians in this room? And my mate Bigsy put his hand up. You are. There is no way. And I went, that's really funny. I went, nice one, mate. And he went, no, I am actually. I am. I'm in this classroom. I go, are you one of them born again? You're one of them born again? So he went, yeah, I am. I went, you're joking. So he came out of the lesson. I'm like, I am, my head's spinning. My mate, who made me smoke the Bible, he's a born again. He's a born again. He's a Cliff. He's a Cliff. How does that even happen? So I said, what's that? What's the deal? And he went, I went to Emerson Park Evangelical Chapel when we were at Emerson Park Comprehensive School. I went, what's that? He said, it's a Brethren church. I said, what's a Brethren church? He said, it's a little chapel. And he said, we used to go to the youth club, and then they told me about Jesus, and I realised it was true, and I'd given my life to him. What does that mean, give your life to him? I said, I can't handle that. The only thing I knew how to defend myself against this cult, which is what I thought it was to take the mick. First line of defence. So I mocked him. Unbelievably mocked him. I used to hide in the cupboard at the sixth form common room until I knew he was coming in, then burst out and pretend to do the resurrection. I'm in the tomb, I'm out. Did impressions of Jesus dying. I mocked him. I learnt stuff and I harassed him with it. And then one day, in front of a group of girls, I was trying to make them laugh at him. So I thought if I make the girls laugh, they might go out with me. Because when you're 5'8.5", a bit stocky, it's the only thing you got is your humour. So he then came over to me, very aggressively, and he weren't an aggressive bloke and isn't to this day, and he prodded me on the chest like that. He went, if you don't come to church with me on Sunday, you're a chicken. That's a very clever strategy for getting a bloke to church, if you think about it. I said, well, I went, of course I'll go to church. It's nothing. He said, I'll pick you up at 7 o'clock. I'm going to take you to YPF. I said, what's YPF? He said, the young person's focus group. That's what you focus on. I went, Jesus. I went, oh, no. He said, I'll pick you up with Doug on Sunday at 7 outside your house. I said, who's Doug? He said, he's a deacon, a youth deacon. I said, what's a deacon? He goes, not an elder. I go, what's an elder? He goes, important ones. I go, I don't know what is going on. That's weird. Doug pulls up on Sunday and I'm sitting outside the front of my house because I don't want my dad to know, Arden cop, I'm going to church. And I certainly didn't want my sister to know, so I'll be taken apart. Doug pulls up. He's 44 years old. I thought he was nearly dead. But how can you be a youth deacon? How can you be a youth deacon? You're nearly dead. He pulls up in a brown Morris Merino. I know. My dad admittedly had an Austin Allegro. But you know why I had an Austin Allegro? He had a cut and shut Austin Allegro that had a radio fitted in it by MI5. You think that undercover detectives have flash cars. They don't. They have cars that no one suspects you're going to be in. So he had an Allegro, but a Morris Marina, that's a degree under. So I get in the back of his car, Doug's there, and it's a vivid memory for me. He's wearing a yellow cotton shirt and a pair of Farrahs, trying to be cool. We put away. I'm sitting in the back a bit worried. We get to the traffic lights, and Doug leans over to Bigsy like this, and he goes, I'm so grateful to God, Alex, that he's given me this car. Oh, I remember like the world falling apart beneath me. I'm like, God has given you a car, and it's a Morris Marina. I'm thinking, if that had been a Porsche 911, I would have been kumbayaing by the time we got to church. What kind of Morris Marina? So I'm going, what are you saying? And he looked at me and he went, he turned around the traffic lights and went, one day, son, you'll understand. Ooh. Anyway, get to the church. The evening service is finished. The YPF's about to begin. Alex, it turns out, Biggs would normally be in the evening service. They came to get me. It was a church about half this size. And on the back row, as the meeting was finished, I came through the back doors, service had finished, still sitting on the back row, all these girls. And they were quite good looking. I'm like, okay. Now I know how Biggsies are born again. That is not what I'd expected. I wasn't expecting that. There's one girl there that I particularly liked, and I did ask her out that night. I said, I think I'll be really good for you. I'll take you, a bit cheeky. Seriously, I went, let's go to the Deep Pan Pizza Factory in Romford. I know how to treat a girl, good. And she said, no, I only go out with Christians. And I went, I am one. I'm British. Because we're all Christians. British people are Church of England. I said, I'm C of E. When you chop your finger off, you used to go to hospital and they collect the data. Go, what religion are you? You go to C of E. We thought we were Christians. She went, no, I mean someone who's met Jesus. I went, I have. Because I've been a king in the nativity at school. So I definitely met him. Like, I knew him. I've done it. I nailed it. And she went, no. I mean, like, completely committed your life to Jesus. I wouldn't even think about it. No joke, and there are witnesses to this, which will become clear in a bit. I faked a conversion the following week. I came into YPF, which was a discussion group about Jesus, and I was a bit cheeky. I came back, so I fancied this girl, and I said, it's happened this week. I'm praying, and I felt something, and it's happened. And she looked at me and went, No, it ain't. I went, how can you tell? She said, you stink of roll-ups. So that was that. Anyway, I kept going for about 6 months on and off, tried this girl out. And a very long story short, there was another old bloke called Tony, who was 42. And he was an investment banker. Very impressive. Had a Beamer, lovely house, bit suave. Worked at like Dresdner, Kleinwort, Wasserstein or something on the dealing floor. Then he came over to me and he went, I'm going to be very honest with you. You're quite annoying in the group. It's nice, isn't it? Warm welcome. And he said, but I like you. You said you're a bit cheeky, sort of people you like working with and all that. And he said, we got a weekend coming up in Clacton. Church weekend in Clacton. When you grow up in Hornchurch, Clacton's like Barbados, my friend. So I'm like, happy days, Barbados. And he said, I was captain of Essex Judo squad at the time. I was playing a lot of rugby in a gym lot. He said, there's a gym, there's a pool, there's a bar. I'll pay for the whole lot. Everything. But there's a condition. There's a bloke coming to give talks. There's 3 talks a day from the Bible. I want you to listen to them. And then you can do what you want. My word is my bond. I shook his hand on it. Turned out the speaker was a guy called Robert Scott. You've never heard of him. He used to be a paratrooper. And then he'd become a Methodist minister. And I remember saying to Tony, full of bravado again, although the bravado is fake, I said to him, what they got in common? Both kill people, one with a gun, one out of boredom. How does that even work? And I remember in the background thinking, how do you go from being a para, an elite, fearless soldier, to being a vicar? How does that even work? But because my word was my bond, we went to Clacton, and I listened to every talk. And every talk was the same, across the whole weekend, with different stories and different bits of the Bible. It was, Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and he died on a cross for you. He cleaned up everything in your life. And then the things that are killing you, he proved won't kill you because he rose from the dead. And if you give your life to him, you'll be with him forever. And your life will immeasurably change. That was simply it. Like, your life will immeasurably change. There's a verse in the Bible in John 6 where Jesus says, I'm the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never hunger or thirst again. He talks about that. And I've been talking about it ever since, really, because, you know, like on Facebook, there's a thing like, describe your job in a very boring way. And I've been talking about the same person for 30 years. So ever since this moment, I've been talking about Jesus. There's a lot of things men try and get hold of to satisfy desires in their life or to scratch the itch. Drugs, sex, gambling, sport addiction, golf, apparently. Some people playing the trombone, whatever. But he was saying the only thing that will ever satisfy your spiritual hunger and give you peace in your heart and joy in your heart is me. So I went through this church weekend and I shifted my thinking, which I suspect one or two of you here might be in that place, which was maybe there is a God. I don't think anyone with integrity can say categorically there's not. Even the most staunch atheists would say scientifically we have to be open-minded. And I'm like, okay, I'll put God in the back pocket. And if I ever need to pray to him, I will. I remember when my mum nearly died and my dad, this hardened guy, said, all we can do now, son, is pray. Which is funny, you know, looking back how people get spiritual in times of crisis. You know, that was me. So I thought, well, I'll go back to this church from Clacton to Hornchurch, to this Emerson Park Brethren Church, after the weekend, to have one last go at asking this girl out. Robert Scott came back with us. He preached the final message, and it was about Noah and the flood. I was a bit het up about that whenever Christians talked about the flood. I remember thinking, what a terrible story. What an awful story, the world being flooded. And God promising me never do it again. I remember going to Haven Christian Bookshop in Romford as a non-Christian, asking for a book on the flood. And they showed me the children's section with a pop-up book with giraffes and swans in it. And I'm going, is that it? Like, everything dies and it's a pop-up kid's story, you psychopath. I remember thinking that, it's so weird. So he's talking about this, and it was a subject that I was a bit wound up about. Then he stopped. It's the second time it's happened in my life. There are about 200 people there. I'm sitting at the back. And he said, this isn't Robert speaking now, it's God speaking. I'm sitting next to Alex, Bigsy. I went to him, well, it looks like Robert. What a muppet. That's weird. Then he said it again. This isn't Robert speaking, it's God speaking. And God is speaking to one person in this room right now. And if you don't stand up and give your life to Jesus Christ, my son, and commit your life to him, your ways to him, then you won't go and do all the things I'm calling you to do. And everything I'm putting in your life and will put in your life will be wasted. So stand up. In that moment, I cannot explain to you, gentlemen, what happened. But I realised I was on my feet. Something connected from head to heart. And not only that, I was crying. And I'm not a crier, but I was really weeping and sobbing. Broken inside. And with this incredible feeling of love and joy flowing through me in an indescribable way. Anyway, it's a sort of church where the men wore suits, women wore hats. It was very traditional. And no one really made a noise. And there's like shuffling of feet. And then Robert said, praise God or something at the front. People were acting a bit surprised. I sat down and Bigsy went, what'd you do that for? I went, I thought you'd be happy. He's like, what's going on? I'll tell you why that was a bit weird if I remember in a minute. If I forget, ask me later. These two elders came to me and came marching from the front out to the back. They were both called Ron. One was tall, Ron Aldridge, and one was really short, Ron Blows. The two Rons came over and they went, we need to talk to you in the back room. I thought, what have I done? I don't know what's going on. I thought they're going to tap me in the head or something. You've got to go in there, there's all plastic on the floor. What's happening? And they escorted me out. And they sat me on a chair between them. It was like a scene out of the Goodfellas, looking back. They sat me on a chair and they went, young man, what do you believe? They went, I don't believe nothing, Ron. I don't know. I don't believe nothing. And they looked at me and they went, well, clearly something's happened to you. Ron Blows talk like this. Well, clearly something's happened to you. And we don't know and you don't know. But we'll come back next week and we'll talk about it then. And I went to walk out the room. I went, Ron, come back, Ron. And the two ones came back in. And I went, don't go. I said, I don't know nothing. But I don't know. I know Jesus died for me. I don't know where that came from. It's out of my heart. I know Jesus died for me. Started crying again. And these two old boys, real proper, prim and proper types, pulled me up out of the chair and they started hugging me. They didn't just hug me, they hugged me tight. Mum started crying. And now I'm sobering up fast. I'm like, this is weird. And they're like spinning me around like this and hugging me, not letting go. And I'm going, freaking out now. I'm freaking out. And then they opened the door to the back room. It's a vestry, isn't it, in the church? Vestry. They opened the door to the back room and they went, no word of a lie. Carl was lost. And now he's found. And I'm like, I'm in on church. I don't know what even that means. I don't know what you all mean. And then that girl who I fancied came over and gave me a kiss. I'm like, I should have done that 6 months ago. And now she's my wife. Amazing, isn't it? That's how you know it's all true. She gave me a Bible that night. And on that Bible, which I've still got, it's falling apart now, but on the back page it says, Carl, I love you and I always will. I've kept that for no sentimental reason at all. That is the best get out of jail free card a man could ever have. Whenever I screw up, I'm like, look, sweetheart, you wrote that in 1990. You said you'd always love me. You wrote that in the Bible. Still got it. Very, very useful about half a dozen times. Maybe more. Anyway, I then stood out the front of the church on the Ardley Green Road in Hornchurch, and across the other side of the road was a dying shrub. I've got a tooth missing at the moment, getting an implant. That was a €1 baguette in Lanzarote with you, isn't it? And I bit into it and it snapped me tooth off. That €1 baguette is going to cost me $3,000, Arthur. Anyway, so it's a bush. There's a dying bush on the other side of the road. And I remember standing on the steps of the chapel and I'm looking at this dying bush on the main road and weeping, crying again. And Biggsy goes to me, what are you crying for now? And I went, it's green. You know what are you talking about? I said, the leaves, they're green. He said, oh, yeah, I don't know what you're saying. I went, Biggsy, leaves are green. It was like I'd come out of a black and white picture. We used to call it Technicolor, into Technicolor. Because I was seeing the world that God had made for the first time. And by the time I stopped shaking, I had a little VW Polo. And I drove home through Hornchurch and Watford, back to my parents' house. Now I'm looking at people of all shapes and sizes, colours and races in Watford. And I'm thinking, wow, these are God's kids. These are made by God. They're God's children. They don't even know. I've got to tell them. And a lot of people who come to Christ like that, they become evangelists, like Tough Talking, because you come out of darkness into light so suddenly, like, it's such a shock. People have got to know. So you talk to an evangelist, that's often their story. That is mine. There's other stuff going on in my life I haven't got time to go into now. But it was darkness to light. And I got up the next morning, I went straight to my room, didn't tell my parents, got up the next morning, and I thought, I've got to tell my dad. I could hear the frying pan going off, and a bit of bacon going off in the frying pan. My dad would often be up out early, he's got to go to the Old Bailey, give evidence, or do a job or something. He's cooking a bit of bacon. And I went downstairs to my dad, bold as brass. I went, Dad, I'm not joining the British Army anymore. So I met Jesus Christ last night. I'm going to fight battle swim instead for the rest of my life. My dad, he didn't even look up from the frying pan. He just went, you still fancy girls, didn't you, son? That's the main thing, isn't it? No joke. No joke. So I'm like, oh, muppet, idiot. So I went upstairs and I had this Bible that Karen had got me. It's not this one. And I'm like, oh, God, if this was real, you've got to speak to me. And no word of a lie, this brand new NIV Bible, 1989, I opened it, and it opened onto the book that I'd smoked back to. The last page of the book I smoked back to, Hebrews. And the verse that was separated out, this wasn't the Bible I'd smoked, it was just the equivalent chapter. I was like, that's amazing. It was Hebrews 5, and it said, keep your life free from the love of money. Be satisfied with what you have. For I've said to you, I will never leave you or abandon you. And I remember sitting on the edge of my bed and I had the same feeling I had the night before. And I bowed my head and I prayed my first ever proper prayer by myself. Other than the prayer that they led me in the night before, which was, I'll follow you wherever you tell me to go. And I'll do whatever you ask me to do, no matter what. And that's my solemn promise from this day on. Now, my life has been punctuated ever since then by ups and downs. But to link into the talk I'll do next, because that's the story I gave my life to Christ. I had to journey through the rest of sixth form. I remember walking up the road with this girl called Sarah Horton, and she said to me, what has happened to you in the last 2 weeks? You were so out for number one. You saw everyone as either a pound note sign or a target. And now you really care. She noticed a difference in 2 weeks. I had total soul surgery. My whole personality character started to change. I didn't join the army, not because I have an objection to military stuff. I work with them very closely to this day. But I felt God called me to fight another sort of battle. I went to uni. I did a degree in engineering. I came out in an engineering and construction recession. I got a job in a bank in the city as a salesman, made a shed load of cash, and God still breaking my heart for the poor. And by the age of 24, I come out of the bank with the community, spend every penny that I had planting churches in areas of deprivation. The first church I planted, I was 24 years old, didn't have a clue what I was doing. It was amongst addiction and prostitution and homelessness and serious domestic violence and all kinds of snags in one of the most deprived estates of Essex. And that moment, age 5, staring out the window, thinking one day I'm going to change it, suddenly I've gone from being part of the problem to part of the solution, except I realised that I'm not going to change it. but by the power of God and cooperating with him, he can use us to change things. And that has been the trajectory of my life ever since. Even doing CVM, I've always planted a church or worked in there at deprivation. I run something called Edge Ministries now, which is tackling some of the poorest communities across the UK, bringing hope and Christ and help. Call it giving hope and help to all, reaching forgotten people in forgotten places, pioneering stuff, literally living on the edge to help people on the edge. That has been a story of my life, but that has come with more cost than people realise. And in the next talk I do, I'm going to talk you through some of that cost and how I come through it by God's grace. And to him be all the glory. Thank you for listening.